Hello and welcome to this special episode of Elanomics. Just about 40 minutes back, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman finished presenting her budget to Parliament. This was a highly anticipated budget speech and presentation because the budget was expected to give a assumption, some tax relief, and basically help the Indian economy overcome the pain it has gone through in the last 2 years due to the pandemic and the slowdown before that. How much of that has it achieved? We have Professor Ela Patnaik with us, and I'm sure you're here to listen to her and not me. So without much ado, over to Ela. Ela, very first impressions without getting into the details.
Hugely growth-oriented, focus on public sector infrastructure, focus on capex, which includes not just public but also private. So huge focus on growth.
So let's talk a little bit more about growth. And we were expecting this huge push for infrastructure and the capex. From the numbers we have, and I must also tell our viewers first up, because we are just doing this within less than an hour after the budget has been presented. The papers are still not out. The fine print is not out. Please send us your questions and we'll try to answer them as much as possible. But there may be some questions we may not be able to answer because the fine print, the details, the numbers may not be available. So please do bear with us. Coming back to capex, Ela, capex target at 7, that is capital expenditure target at 7.5 lakh crore from last year's 5.5 lakh crore, revised to about 6 lakh crore. That's a 37% jump on B. And the general expectation was 20%. So they've given a real big push to capex there.
Yeah, I think that the emphasis has been as much as really possible, because you kept the fiscal deficit at 6.4, the estimated deficit at 6.4, and you're pretty much you're borrowing for capex. You're borrowing for investing in infrastructure. So I think that's really, really making it clear that this is the way that we'll go.
In fact, even over the last year and a half, everybody was talking about a new deal, like what was done in the US in the 50s or 60s. There was the new deal where build your way out of a slump, build your way out of slowdown. We saw the finance minister talk about the Gati Shakti master plan, highway network to grow by 25,000 kilometers in 2023, 400 new Vande Bharat trains to be introduced in the next 3 years, multimodal logistics parks. I won't repeat all of these things, just for the benefit of our own discussion. So this building our way out of this slowdown, how will it work?
See, the discussion really at this time after the pandemic was, should you do a big consumption push and a lot of redistribution, or should you do a push to growth and jobs and capex and then get a multiplier effect and get crowding in? And given the limited resources that the government always has, and more so in the case of the pandemic, the question, with this whole discussion about the K-shaped recovery was that, no, you don't need to push further on the formal sector, which is already growing fast, but you need to push for redistribution. So that's what a lot of people, I didn't agree with them, but that's what a lot of people were saying. So I think I think this is the right thing to do, that you can do redistribution for some time, for 1 year, 2 years, and now, especially if after Omicron, the COVID becomes mild and that we do get on our path of recovery and lockdowns are behind us, then the thing to do is to increase investment. And to increase investment, what can the government do? The government can push for public sector investment in infrastructure and create conditions for more private sector investment. So that's the direction in which, a clear direction in which this emphasis on growth is being given.
And surprisingly, there were no huge giveaways like you mentioned. Everybody or a section of the pundits were expecting, especially because we have these big elections in the heartland, Uttar Pradesh votes starting this month, and people were expecting giveaways. No huge giveaways. Although there have been some nominal announcements like Ken Betwa linking, which was already in the pipeline, natural farming along the Ganga, 80 lakh new dwellings in rural and urban areas under PM Awas, 3.8 crore households to get piped water. Nothing is a giveaway.
Yeah, because if you start this budget starts 1st April, okay, the elections are already over. UP elections, the state elections are already over. So actually what you do now affects not these elections, but 2024. So if you can actually implement these big schemes, get demand up, because what infrastructure does is it also eases the supply side. And this is not a time when you can just do demand side push, because you'll hit against supply constraints and you'll then get higher inflation. So what you need to do is not just get a demand push, but get a supply push as well, and that you do through infrastructure, which really takes you to 2024 or beyond. I mean, it's a long-term thing. It's not about an election that will actually be over. And, it is the pink papers and the media that focuses on what the budget does. They couldn't have got anything out before the elections.
We are also the media, Ela. We are also the media. But it could have probably helped the optics, is the feeling that, some big giveaways or some tokenism, would help the political optics.
So the one kind of optics that could have been done is to give some relief to the middle class. Okay? Because, you've had high inflation, lots of people have had income losses, because to a large extent the middle class is in the service sector to a large extent, and other than public sector employees, a lot of private sector employees have actually seen their incomes go down, other than in some sectors which have done very well. But across in hospitality, restaurants, many services, employees have seen incomes go down, and that would have been a kind of relief that could have been given. But I think here it's a clear signal on growth. We need to get growth before we can do redistribution, before we can give relief, before we can push for consumption demand. So yes, I'm sure people will be disappointed that you didn't get that, but the emphasis is we are looking long term and we are focusing on infrastructure.
Because yesterday the impression we got from the economic survey was that there is room for an expansionary budget because tax revenues are very buoyant. But obviously the government is planning to conserve, like it has typically tried to over the last 7 or 8 years since this BJP NDA government has been in power. And the other conversation was about balancing growth and trying to push demand with fiscal prudence and not get profligacy, not go towards profligacy. You think that has been achieved, right?
Yeah. So you see that throughout the attempt to stick to fiscal consolidation. Sometimes not sticking to it too much because you've had the pandemic. So you got your revised estimate was 6.9 for the fiscal deficit, but then as finance minister said, she's putting us back on the path of consolidation that was pre-announced, trying to get to 6.4. Actually this is quite a brave move because there is so much pressure from all the from a lot of economists, especially those who live abroad and who've seen their governments give a lot of spend. And they're used to 10% of GDP as a COVID response, and we're not seeing that here. So all that pressure that comes from across the world has been resisted, and the hope is that instead of giving out doles, you will revive jobs, and that's where the push is.
But 6.4 is not a comfortable number.
6.4 is high enough.
Yeah.
It's high enough. But because it is going in infra, I don't know that it will be seen too badly by anybody. Okay, so though for some time you will see markets, you'll see yields go up, and for some time, yes, anyway interest rates were expected to go up because of monetary tightening, and with a 6.4 you might still have interest rates go up a little, plus you didn't get that withholding tax removal that FIIs were hoping for. So again, interest rates might, be, the bond market might not be very happy with this. But, given that it was pandemic year, how would the bond market have reacted if you had done that much? Instead, the 35% increase has been on consumption demand rather than on investment, which actually pushes your longer term growth.
Disinvestment, because that is another area where the government was expected to get some good revenues. Last year the target, I think if I'm correct, it was around 1.75 lakh crore. We don't know what are the revised target, because the LIC IPO is still to happen this year. But this year, that is for FY23, the disinvestment target is very conservative, 65,000 crore.
So I think last year was very ambitious. And this time the ambitions seem to have been trimmed quite a bit. So I haven't been able to look at the numbers. We couldn't get the file yet. It wasn't on the website when we walked into this studio.
Yeah.
But, the last number in the survey was 9,800 plus crores. And then the Ispat number was about 12,000 crores. So that put together would take you to about 21. And compared to 1,75,000 crores, I think it was too far. So maybe they've really trimmed their expectations for this year.
We will go to the next big expectation we had, Ela. We were talking about it a lot. Tax reforms, tax relief, some, simplification of taxes also, because we said there are two ways of filing your direct income taxes. But all that we heard was a lot of tinkering, updated returns within 2 years of assessment year to help voluntary compliance, some relief for cooperatives, the differently abled people, startups, new manufacturers, some LTCG tinkering, surcharge on corporate tax pruned to 7% from 12%. So I think I come back to the word tinkering.
If I may say from my experience in the ministry, the one takeaway was that it's very difficult to persuade Department of Revenue. So even if, not that I'm saying this time one knows anything, but even if the finance minister wants to bring down taxes, they give 1,000 reasons why it is going to be bad for the budget.
And she was quoting the Mahabharata.
So I'm not surprised. I mean, when we always hope that rationalization, simplification, reduction in tax rates would happen, but I think that's one of the most difficult things to do. So very often one wonders which is less willing to change, the Department of Revenue or the Reserve Bank of India. So there's always a contest there, but that is my experience, that it's not easy.
One last point before we take questions. We have a lot of questions. Two important announcements which a lot of especially our young viewers would be interested. The Reserve Bank of India will issue a digital rupee which uses the blockchain technology in the coming financial year, and a 30% tax on virtual digital asset transactions, which, like you said, virtually legalizes cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, so two very interesting developments. Now, central bank currency being digital is something that's been in the, it's been discussed. The question is it still going to be backed by reserve money? If it is, yes. How is it different from the money that we have? It is different if you are not allowed to take out cash against it, but if there's a one-to-one exchange rate, would you prefer to go and have hold currency which you can't cash out? So second rather question it gives rise to is, what about cross-border transactions? If the same set of rules apply that apply to the rupee, then how is it any different? Okay, or is it simply that it's going to be held in a manner that is on blockchain, so less prone to attacks or theft? So one has to see
How it works out.
how it works out. On crypto, the bill hasn't come in yet, but clearly, if you start taxing and cutting TDS when there is a transaction and you're doing a 30% capital gains tax?
Yeah.
Then it is effectively perhaps legalizing it, because if you're paying tax on something and the government is aware of it, then it's hardly likely that the government will turn around and tell you that, oh, you were not supposed to own or buy or sell cryptocurrency. So I think that's what these two things seem to indicate.
I think yesterday in one of his interviews or the press conference, Principal Economic Advisor Sanjeev Sanyal said the government will take a very reasonable decision on cryptocurrencies and not do anything extreme. So this seems like a reasonable middle path they seem to have sort of adopted.
And I think in this one, Department of Revenue's desire to
30%,
collect taxes is actually perhaps good, because it clearly, they were letting go of this tax just because the government couldn't make up its mind. Then they say, no, hello, there's tax to be collected here, so let's do it. So that might actually pave the way for adoption or legalizing, regularizing, perhaps regulating to some extent
cryptocurrency. But the question is, how will they go about tracking, implementing transactions?
There are going to be many challenges.
We'll have to wait and watch and read the fine print. We'll take questions, Ela. We've got quite a few, I think. Yes, Anshuman Ghosh. Hi, Anshuman. And I want to tell our viewers again, we will try and answer your questions to the best of Ela's ability, because we haven't read the fine print. A lot of things are in the fine print of the budget papers, and that takes time. These are very, very voluminous documents. Why didn't the government make any change in the income tax slabs? Is there any reform for the salaried class which helps the salaried class? We talked about income tax.
I think the only reform is that for state government employees, where the contribution to NPS, the deduction for that goes up from 10 to 14%. That was what we heard in the speech.
Tarush, hi Tarush, regular viewer. What is the reason behind the socialist policy of taxing crypto and asking RBI to launch crypto? RBI will not launch crypto, it's a digital currency, but it's all crypto for them.
Well, in the digital, first of all, the RBI's digital currency may have a 1-to-1 exchange rate with the rupee. So rather than thinking of it as an asset, which most holders of cryptocurrency think of crypto as that it's something that they'll buy now, or they think of some where the exchange rate with the dollar is constant as effectively holding dollars. So Ethereum or it's a stable cryptocurrency. There it's mainly for thinking about it as cross-border transactions. So first, this is not the role that RBI's digital currency may play. And about taxing, I think Department of Revenue saw an opportunity. So if there is opportunity to tax, why not?
There's a pot of gold, let's dip into it. Prashant Tripathi, is there anything in the budget about disinvestment? Hi Prashant, we just talked about it. We said we know the target is 65,000 crore for next year, which is less than half of last year's target. So we don't know which are the companies.
About a third. About a third.
Yeah, almost a third.
Almost a third.
And we know BPCL is likely to happen in the next financial year. That is the one big high profile company. The others we'll have to wait and watch. That's what we know at this point in time. Parth has sent us this question on Twitter. What is the use of a digital rupee? How much more useful or different is it than UPI?
I think for countries which don't have UPI, it is useful because people use wallets and this can be money can be paid into their wallets. I don't know how useful it will be for India. I honestly, I have exactly the same question as you. That given that we have UPI and Bheem and we're using digital payments, wallets all the time, I'm not sure what really does it add.
For me, Paytm, Google Pay, Money Pay, Phone Pay, these are all digital currencies, right? I mean, they're as digital as anything else.
Yeah, except perhaps that if you think that Paytm goes bankrupt or any of the, so you have Airtel Money, let's say, or when you had, say, Kingfisher Miles,
yeah.
right? And when Kingfisher went bankrupt, you lost the miles.
Yeah.
So the only difference really would be that, this
There's a sovereign backing.
This is sovereign backed.
Ankit Dama, a question on Twitter. Is it good that the government has taken some risk to keep pushing on the spending part, irrespective of the high inflation environment prevailing all over the world?
Yes, it is good because, this is not just pushing demand. When you spend on infrastructure, as we were just saying, you're not just pushing demand, you're also easing supply. You're pushing supply, you're constructing, say, more roads. That leads to more investment, more businesses, more production. So it's not just a demand issue, it's a demand and supply.
Nihal Das says, why can't we have the budget speech start with what the economy or what the government actually achieved of its targets in the last year?
So, well, in terms of what the economy achieved, the budget session does start with the economic survey. And the economic survey tells you what was achieved. So, yes, the numbers are till November, maybe not till December. The budget might have one more month of data, but for example, Finance Minister read out the GST numbers for January. So they don't even go into the budget speech. But pretty much what you have in the economic survey, that is on the first day of the budget session, is achievements of the year. So you
only have 10 months. I mean, you still have 2 more months.
So you could have added 1 month more, but it's just that it takes more time to write and print. It takes a week to print. That's all. So it's.
Siddharth Kulkarni, should we worry about government debt considering the fiscal deficit levels?
Well, government, absolutely everybody worries about government debt, but the question here is that the debt could have been what, 10? The deficit could have been 10%, 6%, 4%. So it's always a question of, are you trying to have a sustainable debt to GDP ratio? And that's why you try to do fiscal consolidation, because otherwise you get downgraded by credit rating agencies. And then, you have pressures on your interest payments and on the currency. So of course you worry about it. But if you look at the 6.4 number, versus what it could have been 10 or it could have been 1, then a 6.4 number is one that will kind of keep the debt to GDP ratio stable. Also because of not just looking at the number, but also because of what is it that you're spending on. And if it is growth enhancing, then your denominator also goes up. So the worry about the number is to be seen in the context of what it does to the debt to GDP ratio, which means you look at the debt and you look at what is the kind of spending and what will be the impact on GDP.
Kshitij Shekhar is not asking a question but is just angry. He says privatization is so slow because of these dumb unions and communist agents protesting everything this country does.
Well, yeah.
Pass. Shrijan Datta, do you think this budget will calm most of the stakeholders, or is it going to charge them up? I don't know who he specifically means by stakeholders.
I don't understand the question.
Sorry, Srijan, if you can be more specific, we will try and answer it. Rohan Indra, who's been a member for 2 months. Hello, Rohan. The finance minister spoke extensively about surety bonds in terms of financing. Can you explain what these are and their importance in a layman's term?
So is she talking about the credit guarantee scheme?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically if you need credit, so let's say you've not been able to return the loan that you had taken, and you go to the bank and say, I need credit, or you need it not just to return the loan but to tide over, lack of sales during COVID, and you go to your bank and say, I need credit, then under this scheme, the government actually guarantees that credit, which means that if you're not able to return it, the government will pay the bank that amount of money. So it's a guarantee that the government is giving, and this was done for the pandemic.
We have a question from Vish Kale.
If you go to the documents, the document that she was reading from would be the budget speech.
He has some more things to ask. Also, the Indian digital rupee would be something to be traded in the Indian markets only, just like almost all Indian stocks, or do you think FIIs could dip into it too?
So I'm not even sure it will be traded. I think it will just be a back-to-back rupee, and that it's just that it's digital, and you don't use cash. So in countries where there is a lot of use of cash and not much use of digital payment systems, for that it is useful. Again, there people use a lot more banks, so there it will be more for wallets and not bank to bank transaction. But it's not something, at least I don't think it's something that's going to be traded on markets.
Yeah. We don't know yet, but looks unlikely.
Yeah.
Ankit Dama had another question that came on my Twitter feed. Does this step of taxing digital transactions counter or contrary to the government's mantra of Digital India? Why are you taxing digital transactions?
No, I don't think they're taxing digital transactions. What they're saying is that they're taxing cryptocurrencies when you make capital gains, or when you sell, or you gift, or when you do a transaction. You are, like suppose you're buying or selling a house. Now when you buy or sell a house, you do this TDS because the person who is supposed to pay tax may or may not pay it. So that's why a tax deduction at source is being done, and that is being done at 1%. So that ties in with the capital gains tax that they are introducing for crypto. It's not taxing digital payments.
There's a question from Bharti Vats, who's a member for the last 2 months. Thank you, Bharti. Do you see this budget has been good in continuity and stability, and there is no major surprise?
More or less, yes. Yeah.
Like we discussed earlier, Bharti, there was very little room for any surprise. The only surprise could have been on the downside, where they would have taxed a lot of us and tried to earn more money.
Jaiti Ghosh saying they should tax the super rich. They should impose a wealth tax.
Yeah.
Super rich they're already taxing, but they should impose a wealth tax on the super rich, and or any such thing that could have,
inheritance tax, wealth tax.
Yeah, so there could have been bad things.
Thank God. Okay, we have no other questions right now, but I have 2 minor points to make. This is what we saw on that channel we were watching, the budget, Ila. So there was a question, I think they did a poll. Will the budget focus on infrastructure, boost economic growth? And 85% said yes. So that's a good
I think this
unanimity.
35% push and the speech outlining them is by that 85%.
There was another one. Will budget announcements boost consumption? 67% said no.
Yeah, because you neither got a tax break nor were there any big schemes announced for consumption.
I think in the given time we've known what we've known about the budget. We've tried to bring in as much as possible for our viewers and insights. There will be more to read and more to explain as we go about. Ela will be writing a column tonight, and that will be on the print.in tomorrow, so you can all read it. We will also give it in the notes of this video tomorrow. So please do read, please do watch, and please subscribe to the print if you have not done so. We take a lot of effort to bring these videos and stories and reports for you. We had a special live yesterday after the economic survey, a special live today after the budget, and we will be back with our regular Elanomics on Friday evening. So please do stay with us. We value our viewers a lot, and stay safe and have a good week.